I'm Tamara McMillen. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for the Economist Group.
So, yeah, what led you here? Was it by fate
Yeah,
or was it fate or by design?
they're probably more a bit of fate. I didn't really know much about sales jobs. I mean, the only thing that I knew is about like selling cars, sort of a thing. So I don't come from, my family's not a professional background. They're more, work in foundries and carpentry and stuff like that. So I went to school. I studied international business and marketing. My dream job was to work for the Boston Consulting Group. So I applied, but did not go to a top 10 school. So despite graduating with honors, they politely rejected me. But we were kind enough to send a letter. And in the letter, they suggested that I get some sales experience. And I had actually worked since I was very young. So I thought, oh, come on. And I've done a little bit of something like that, I think. But I thought, fine, I'll go and get a sales job. I'll work there for a year and then I'll go back and apply and I'll go work in consulting because that's what I thought I
Yes.
wanted to do. So I ended up hearing that MCI in the US, the main competitor to AT&T, was doing a bunch of hiring for entry-level sales reps. And so I went down there and I got this entry-level job where I would go to small businesses door to door and try and convert them from AT&T long distance to MCI. But my timing was fortuitous because not only was I good at it and I started making some money, which I enjoyed, but the internet became a product. And we were the company that really took the internet into the B2B environment. So it really ended up being a bit of consulting. It was fast paced, it was really interesting, and I was kind of in the right place at the right time. And as they say, the rest
Yes.
is history.
Having started in a similar place myself, that's life only gets a little bit easier from there, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
MCI, were they the sort of challenger to AT&T?
Yeah, they were the company. It was originally led by a guy named Bill McGowan, who
Yes.
formed the company in I think 1968, and he was responsible for breaking up the monopoly of AT&T and T and causing the deregulation or whatever. Yeah, and they were
Yeah.
the primary competitor, and then Sprint and all the other companies came around. But it was a great company to work for. They leveraged marketing heavily in order to
Yes.
take market share. It's a great, great time to be in IT services and communications.
And if you think of your job now, what's generally been the most challenging part of your job?
I'd say as a CRO or any kind of revenue leader, it's probably that tension point that you hold between balancing your short-term revenue pressures with the long-term goals of the business and profitability drivers and other things you have to achieve. Obviously, selling is a team sport with individual rewards, so you need to have, you need to orchestrate across cross-functional groups, and that can certainly be challenging at times, particularly if you don't happen to be organized around shared KPIs or things like that. So sometimes you have to work through what can appear to be conflicting goals to arrive at the same end. I think leading through change, which certainly is extremely relevant for most in sales revenue positions today with the geopolitical environment and the macroeconomic challenges that are going on, it's certainly some very uncertain times, which creates for delayed decisions, more stakeholders, freezing of budgets. So it really causes you to dig deep to keep succeeding.
What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? But maybe if you think specifically around sort of leading through change, what advice could you give those that are sort of working through that as well?
I think it is pivoting from the best practices that you should implement to making sure you're doing the tactical things that need to be done for the here and now.
Yes.
That sometimes leading through change, there are things that you need to sacrifice because they make more sense. Knowing how and when to do that is not always easy,
Yeah.
and knowing what compromises to make. So I think along the journey, I've learned and had to relearn at times how
Mm.
to do that. You think you're heading in one direction because there's a certain set of principles or frameworks or tooling or skills that you want to implement because they're good, but right now what we need is to generate some sales, or right now what we need is
Yeah.
something else. And so how do you continue to do that? I think leading through
Mm.
change is also about winning hearts and minds. Sales is a tough job. It's not for the faint of heart, and there's a lot of things that sales individuals don't control. They don't control the
Mm.
market. They don't control how their targets are set. They don't control the pricing on their product and many of these things. But so you really have to win hearts and minds to lead them through change, because that change is usually causing a level of pain for them in some form or
Yes.
fashion. And I think that's about helping them understand the vision and how you're going to help them get where it is that you're trying to go, and that they're kind of not in it alone. You're trying to control the controllables and accept that
Yes.
there's plenty of things we can't control, but what we can control is where we're going to focus.
A lot of people out there obviously think that you need to sort of make sales a science, which might be a particular process that you need to follow. And you also talked about understanding what you need to sacrifice, as in you can't do anything. So are you saying, there is a process that you need to follow generally, but in certain circumstances or in difficult markets, it might not be possible, and therefore you need to do what you need to do to get the job done, or work through a sales process or whatever it might be. Is that sort
Mm.
of what you're saying?
In some senses, I mean, I think sales is a science. It is a
Yes.
numbers game. y- you have to understand your numbers in order to sort of build that science up. And I recently led my teams through an exercise of, working backward. Like, what is the number you have to achieve? What is the average deal size that you close? What is your win rate percentage? So how many proposals do you need, at
Yes.
that value and your win rate? And then how many opportunities does it take to get to those proposals? And how many conversations and meetings does it take to get to that many opportunities? So I think there is a science that you want to deploy and help people think about, because it gives them control of their own destiny. um, and I don't think that those principles change based on circumstances. The pivoting I'm talking about might be doing some of the things that are slightly more tactical and in the moment.
Yes.
So, for example, a little bit more down and dirty, like, hey, let's just try and call this group of people, take advantage of these particular situations.
Mm.
Whereas strategically, you might take another moment in time and go, well, is that the optimum list? Let's give it a good scrub. Let's do some other things and set a more strategic plan. But, when
Yes.
time is of the essence, you'll forgo some of those things, and you'll be like, look,
Yeah.
let's just crack on and see how we do, because at the moment the time that we save is more valuable today than it might be tomorrow. So I
Yes.
don't know if that
Yes.
helps manage it. But yeah, and I think where I talked about hearts and minds, I mean, yes, you have to have the frameworks and the science, but you know, you can't. My dad always used to say, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So
Yes.
what you want is to win people's discretionary effort. You can
Mm.
obligate them to have to do certain things, make 10 calls, set 3 meetings, write 5 proposals. But what you really want is that they want to do 12 calls and more meetings and more proposals for themselves, but also because, like, they're like, hey, we really got to win here. They give a level of discretionary effort because it's good for them, and they like being part of something bigger than themselves. And that's when you have to win hearts and minds, because just completing a task is one thing. Completing it with quality is
Yes.
something far different.
And conviction as well, right? As you say,
Yeah.
just completing a task because
And
it's a
belief.
task. Yeah.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy, but you do have to have belief in what you're doing, and believe that if we do these things, they will provide the result that we're going for. And we'll keep measuring and checking, because if we're slightly off course, we'll adjust, but we're going to commit to move in this direction together,
Yes.
as opposed to letting everybody do it differently. And when we do that, our learnings come quickly and we can adjust and keep going.
And I'm glad you mentioned belief there, because the next question is sort of related. I guess you would support your team in helping them to believe, right? But where do you draw inspiration? Do you have mentors, coaches, activities, things you do?
Different answers. So things that lift my mood are all around music. And those are the things that probably just give me a sense of general optimism in life. And so listening to
Yes.
music, dancing to music, singing, any of those things are probably my more happy place, or going out with the dog for a walk. When I try to draw inspiration, I do like thought leaders like a Simon Sinek. I think it's inspirational and practical the way that he speaks about things. But I also look to peers that I have who've done great things in the businesses that they've worked in. And,
Mm.
it's part of an organization called CRO Connected for a long time, where, it's an aggregation of people who have best practices and battle scars. And for me, that is quite inspiring, because there's so many variables for someone to execute against. You can't have experienced them all. And, this concept of a playbook is one of the things that I find challenging. I understand it, it makes sense, but I always like to think more about frameworks because playbooks are very difficult. If you ran a sports team, you couldn't take that exact playbook to a new sports team and say, just execute this
Yeah.
because the players on the pitch aren't the
Different people,
same.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're not the same.
That's a great point.
And they may even face different competitors, at least until they
Mm.
get to some end point. And so, you need to have plays or you need to have ways of working. You need to know what good looks like, but you really have to be able to read the room that you're in and construct a success plan for that group of people.
And what advice can you give for building high-performing teams
I think you have to
generally?
focus on the fundamentals. Like, first of all, understand your own science. Like, how many calls and meetings and proposals does it really take? Do you understand how you're positioned competitively in the market? Can you answer the whys?
Yes.
Why are you in the market? Why do you solve this problem? Why is solving this problem important? Why is this solving this problem of value? And why should people solve it with you? If you
Yeah.
can't focus on those things, make sure people understand them, make sure they understand their performance metrics, it's going to be very difficult to build a high performing team. I think you have to
Yes.
focus on inputs to get really strong outputs and quality over quantity. I love to say I would rather have a small pipeline that converts at an exceptional rate than
Yes.
a huge pipeline that wastes loads of effort and converts at a very low rate. So that balance of the efficiency and the effectiveness of what you're doing. And the more you can optimize for those things and you're clear where you have a right to win and you spend
Mm.
most of your proactive efforts in that space, that will be what builds high performing teams. And obviously underpin it with, good comp plans that are simple. Don't overcomplicate it. People want to see how to be successful quite simply. All those things can come together to build great teams.
So I guess some advice for maybe someone stepping into a sales leadership role for the first time, although I'm sure they would have some experience, it's just make sure that they and the teams really understand probably the why to start with. And if you think of one or some of the best revenue leaders you've worked with, what do you think made or makes them successful?
I think the best ones remember what it's like to be a seller. They haven't kind of forgotten what it feels like to be in the trenches, so they can take all of the things you learn over the years and translate it in a really practical way that someone
Mm.
feels like, if I do this, I'll be more successful. I think when we become too detached from kind of the actual day job of a seller, it just they become mandates. And I think you can always get conformity, but again, you're not going to sort of win them over in a way that's going to really power and drive the organization. I think the other thing is that the leaders that I really respect, they really understand the drivers of growth in their businesses. Like they know what will move the needle and they
Mm.
are laser focused on those things.
Can you give me an example of what some of those things might be?
I think around the input stuff that we talked about. So like,
Yes.
how do you optimize efforts, everyone's effort, and make sure that they're all rowing in the same direction, that they're
Mm.
delivering on their activities, consistently, and that you're measuring the things that are important and you're recalibrating. So like they're very clear on their drivers of growth might be, we have to do X number of demos, or we need to have so many client engagements, or we need to be present at certain types of events because that's where our competitors are, and to not be there says far more than what we say when we're there. So I think they just really understand their market position, what's going to drive their growth and where they need to be to play in that
Yes.
market well. And I think they
Yeah.
also don't try and take on, they know their sweet spot. 'Cause that's the other thing. Like, you might have a better product than someone else, but if they've already got most of the market share, you're going to spend an awful lot of time trying to win loyal customers away from that company versus understanding what differentiates you and where your sweet spot is. There will be a set of clients who could be customers
Mm.
of your competitor, but there's something that differentiates them. So, kind of the ideal customer profile, really knowing who should
Yes.
be buying your product and engaging with them and not
Yeah.
wasting time on a lot of other individuals.
And understanding where you have the highest probability of winning. My next question actually was around when you're diagnosing or assessing a go-to-market team, like what's the first thing you're looking for? You did answer some, I think you answered some of that in the previous questions, but
Mm.
if you can think of sort of maybe one or two questions that you might be asking yourself, as you take on a new project about a particular team or a function or a sales function, what would those be?
It's interesting because a lot of, when I worked for HG, I think the thing that everyone likes to talk about is like their win rate, which usually is around 50% or so. Uh,
Yeah.
and they're measuring it though from their proposal stage, which is a point at which you would expect a win rate to be quite high.
Yes.
Or they will talk about how many reps are over their targets, but that makes an assumption that their targets are set appropriately and not too low. If I set
Yes.
really low targets, then I can have a high performing team, but actually my cost of sale is really high. So it's not a very revenue efficient organization. The challenge with assessing a GTM is it's not really one thing. Go to market is a holistic practice across sales, marketing, and product. And in order to effectively look at it, you do have to look at all those things like, is the team successful? Are clients wanting to buy this thing in the market, and are they able to take it into the market? Do they understand where they play? Marketing, are we running something that's quite optimized? Are we spending an awful lot of money just to get a single customer through the door? And the product, are we building the things that the market is demanding and that our existing customers are buying? Or are we building what we can build and hoping somebody will buy it? So
Mm.
those would be sort of the things that I would look like. How is the sales team organized, incentivized? And what is it sort of they're driving for, and how effectively and efficiently are they able to execute against that? How is marketing aligned to the things that sales is taking into the market, and are they equipping them to have
Mm.
those conversations with clients that aligns with sort of our broader message to the market? And then the products, are we taking that customer feedback to iterate on our products and services to keep our customers loyal and to build our products in a way that they'll buy more, but while staying competitive in the market, because somebody's always chasing you? So are we aware of where the market's going in addition to what our customers want to buy? So I think you have to kind of look across those
Yes.
things to determine how healthy someone's go-to market really is.
Is there technology that you're excited about? Because I think we know the technology that everyone's excited about, which I think you've been
Yeah.
working in for a bit longer than most. But maybe within that technology, or is there something about your market that excites you most at the moment?
Well, I guess there's two different things there. So, I mean, AI is a game changer.
Mm.
That means a lot of different things. I think the skill is really in how you engage with AI. What are the questions that you ask? And I think that still
Yeah.
takes a level of skill, knowledge, and understanding. Tools don't solve business problems. They're exactly that. They're tools. So I think AI can be as distracting as it is helpful. It's all about how you're implementing it, and are you really equipping people to really change what they do, or are you just giving them a more optimized search function? And I
Yes.
think that most of us are still on that journey, right? Trying to figure out how we really change business practices using technology. But so I mean, I don't think that there's a silver bullet tool out there. I've enjoyed different ones at different times, but I think broadly speaking, tools that are leveraging AI to provide insights for better decisioning are,
Mm.
they're absolutely meaningful. We have so much data and we can have a lot of reporting, but it's the insights that we need to act on. And anything that can help us have those insights is extremely meaningful.
As you'd imagine, I talk to loads and loads of people who are looking for their next step in their career. And I know that you've worked in telco, you've worked in data warehousing, you've worked in earlier stage AI, now media, you work for a PE fund. And often when I talk to these individuals, most of the opportunities they're looking at are actually not selling the exact product that they've sold before to the people that they're used to selling.
Yeah.
So it's something that might be parallel, and what they really sort of need to shine through in order to progress in the process or do well, it clearly kind of go to market expertise. And actually, certainly earlier stages of searches, when I talk to clients, they will often say we're quite open with product, maybe less sector that they sell into, but product. Uh, often it does get to latter stages where that sort of product does become a bit more important. But do you have any advice for those going through processes or wanting to step out of the sort of industrial product that they're in into something new? And were there any learnings for you when you moved from one to the next, and how you got the job, and whether there were themes around What was the same and what was different?
Sadly, what I would say is that transferable skills in go-to-market should be enough,
Yes.
because all companies are really trying to solve for the same types of problems. Like, how do we get the things that we sell in the hands of customers and do that in a time effective way at a profitable price? And there's only so many ways of massaging the machine, especially like if you're working in B2B, say, for example, there's a way of working. If you're working in SaaS, it's a recurring revenue model. Like, there's certain aspects, or if you're working in services, there's things that you can apply, but the industries themselves aren't always as accepting of that would be. So I think it does make it harder if you want, it's harder for me in a sense because I have a broader basic experience, because it takes a bit of work on the side of the person that I'm having a conversation with. If I'd worked for 25 years in financial services and fintech, and I'm applying for a role in that industry, they'll make a lot of assumptions about my capabilities, right, wrong,
Yes.
or different. And it'll feel as if there's a speed to impact, right? And I can't say that that's wholly untrue, because there are certain advantages, but my experience is that's often not the most important thing for someone to be effective in that role. So I think if you're a person who, like, your expertise is in building teams and you can build all kinds of teams, you just have to be prepared for the fact that those skills will be valuable in any type of business, and they'll
Mm.
have different challenges at different stages and different industries or markets, but those skills will apply. But it might be a little bit more difficult to get your foot in that door because people are
Yes.
largely creatures of habit, and there's certain industries where that is more true than others. Yeah, I think when you're on the front facing side, there's certain roles where that's less relevant, but I think in go
Yeah.
to market it tends to be, people tend to stick in their industries a little bit more.
Thanks, Tamara.
You're
That was
welcome. It was
brilliant.
lovely to speak with you.